Hail, and welcome back to Elder Futhark Rune Divination 101. Today we are discussing the rune of Tiwaz, the warrior rune, rune of the god Tyr, rune of the left-handed god, rune of justice, and other associated attributes. So because this is a very interesting rune, this is the opener to the third aid, we are going to dive right in. Tiwaz is the 17th rune of the Elder Futhark, making it, as I said, the first rune, the first initiatory rune of the third eight, which is known as Tiwaz's eight or Tyr's eight, which is, of course, fitting. So the modern day letter equivalent is the letter T, as in words like typhoon. The associated astrological sign is Libra. The associated element is air, and the associated god is obviously Tiwaz himself, as he was known in the Proto-Germanic language. Nowadays we would obviously call this god Tyr, as we know from the Scandinavian mythologies, as we know from the Scandinavian pagan traditions. Tyr is, as mentioned, the left-handed god. He is the god of justice, the god of self-sacrifice, the god of laws and order, and he is also very much a god of war. Tyr is a god who embodies heroism, as I mentioned, self-sacrifice. He embodies self-sacrifice because he is a deity that has sacrificed his dominant hand, his sword-bearing hand, which was, of course, back in those days, in those tribal periods, a very important thing for a man to have, because you would fight to defend your tribe, your kin, your loved ones, your chieftain. And so for Tyr to sacrifice this part of himself, he therefore no less was a god of war, but he sacrificed this hand to the wolf Fenrir, because Fenrir was a wolf that was said to one day devour Odin, the Allfather. Fenrir would devour Odin, and the gods tried, of course, to stop this. They tried chaining Fenrir, they tried binding him, they tried to keep Fenrir restrained, and certain measures were put in place, but this measure would require the sacrifice and pacification of something towards Fenrir, the sacrifice of something towards Fenrir, so that Fenrir would be pacified enough to be contained. And that is exactly what Noble Tyr did. He sacrificed his hand, his sword hand, to Fenrir, so that he could have Fenrir restrained, so that the death of Odin could, of course, as we all know, merely be staved off and not prevented entirely, or so goes the mythology. And again, to reiterate, I don't believe the mythologies are literal. So, to me, the sacrifice of Tyr very clearly demonstrates someone who approaches life with the heart of a true, respectable warrior. He is someone that also rules over law. He is someone that rules over justice, over legal proceedings, rulership, those kinds of things. It is often said that Tyr, or Tiwaz, before Odin became the head of the pantheon, actually used to fulfill that role. So, at one point, he may have perhaps been the ruler over the Aesir, and by extent, divine. Tyr has both a reverse and a converse meaning in divination and in magic, therefore, as well. Now, as said, Tiwaz is the rune of warriors. It is a powerful rune. It is a very masculine rune. It embodies the principles of warfare, whether that be spiritual or physical. It embodies the principles of justice, of just warfare. Tiwaz is the rune that encourages us and empowers us in adversity. It allows us to overcome adversity. It allows us to thrive in adversity. It allows us to stand our ground. It will grant us victory, much like Sowilo does, on the condition that your cause is just. It is a rune that is shaped like a spear or an arrow almost, and it strikes deep into the heart, the mind, the soul of those that would oppose us, that would oppose our ascent, that would stand against those we love, that would stand against us. It is a rune that very much lends strength to the righteous warrior. It lends strength to someone who is fighting for their survival, for the survival of their allies, of their friends, of their family. It is a rune that assists those who have legal rights to justice, meaning that it is a rune you can invoke when you have been wronged, whether you have been slighted in a physical sense, in a legal matter. It is a rune that you can invoke even for justice in spiritual matters, magical matters. In other words, if you use the rune Tiwaz, and if you have been slighted and your cause is actually just, Tiwaz will support your claim. It will enable you to come out on top. Even though it is an empowering rune, Tiwaz also calls for a sacrifice. Just like Tyr himself sacrificed of himself to protect another. That is, of course, where the sacrifice of Odin also comes into play, because Odin did not just sacrifice so that he could, just empower himself. Odin also sought ways to stave off in the mythologies Ragnarok. Odin sought the runes to gain power, and so he sacrificed of himself on the windswept tree, as they say. Now, how does that relate to us? It is fitting because throughout the Futhark, the gods have tested us. The gods have put opposition against us, left and right, front, hind, and center, above and below. And as we are entering through Tiwaz into the third eight, we are entering a different battleground. We are entering a different war, where all the things that we have learned in the material plane, where all the things that we have learned in the mental aspects of ourselves on how to deal with adversity, we have felt what it was like to be restrained, we have felt what it is like to have disruption of our goals, we have felt what it was like to be subject to the whims and dictations of another. We have felt what it was like to catch a breath and then dive right back in headlong into the creation of our own world, our own ascent of our own empowerment, of our own individuality, of our own, raising up of ourselves and those around us, because make no mistake, that is what this rune is about. We have learned to start empowering ourselves, and now it is very much time to start inspiring other people. It is time to start becoming a paragon, as it were, to sacrifice of ourselves further, so that we may pass the initiation that is Tiwaz. So if you are called to this path, if you are called to the path of the spiritual warrior, then this is the rune through which you are being initiated. This is the rune through which you will either make or break yourself on this path. It is not a path that is meant for everyone. It is not a path that is for those who are of weak mind. It is not a path for those who are unable or unwilling to deal with adversity. It is not a path for those who are selfish, and it is not a path for those who are not willing to sacrifice on the behalf of other people. It is a path that is walked on the middle way. There is no choice but to walk on the middle way if you wish to walk this particular path of the warrior, because it is necessary that you have a goal on it. It is necessary that you have the strength, the will, and the determination to not only fight for yourself, for your own interest, and that is perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with that. You should, in fact, look after yourself. You should, in fact, raise yourself up. But you also need to honor those around you. You also need to empower those around you. You need to raise them up as well, because that is, after all, why we are here, so that we learn from each other. Respect your foes, respect those that stand against you, but judge them harshly if necessary. Judge them if they need to be judged. There is something that is very deterring or appealing to this path, depending on your personality. If you have the stomach to walk this path, then this is the rune you want to meditate on. This is the rune that will give you the strength, the courage, the motivation, the inspiration, and the wisdom to walk in the footsteps of Tyr. Because Tyr, his domains of justice and law and war, they seem very opposing, but at the same time, they are so very much intertwined. Those that do not understand the path of spiritual warfare will turn away from it and say, I don't need violence, I don't need change, it is to the detriment of everyone. They do not understand because they do not have the mindset that is necessary to walk this path, and that is fine. There are many paths to which you can be called on the path of a spiritual worker. There are many routes which one can take to their specific enlightenment, ascend, whatever you want to call what your goal is. However, know that shying away from adversity, that shying away from spiritual combat, whether that is against your own internal forces, whether that is against outside forces that seek to harm you, your loved ones, your friends, whether they be individuals, whether they be, of course I mean individuals as in living, breathing human beings, or whether they be spirits, because that is very much possible. The spirit world is not a place of love and light and peace and happiness. Everybody has very much their own schemes. Everybody has very much their own interests, just like we all do. And this is, of course, no different here on planet Earth. So if you do not have the stomach to walk the warrior path, then I would advise you that you take this rune, that you meditate on what it means and what it symbolizes, whether that is just in divination, whether that is just in, you know, the magical energies that you can draw from it. That is absolutely fine. If you are someone who wishes to work with the Futhark, you need all aspects of it, obviously, but if you find yourself drawn to the warrior path, again, you know, this is the rune through which you will be initiated, as I am currently being and have been initiated through it. I dare to say that I am very, very much loving every second of it, because I am learning so much about myself right now. I am learning so much about who I am and who I am not. I am learning so much about who I want to be and who I do not want to be. I am learning who I want to be like. I am learning who I do not wish to be like. I am very much currently going through a transition as I am entering through this gate, through this energetic vortex that is the third eight, into which we are initiated to purify myself, to strip away worthless, dogmatic morality where it is necessary, to sacrifice things that I no longer need, like Tyr that stuck his hand into the mouth of Fenrir. He discarded it, he walked away, he knew that he did what needed to be done. And so, you too, if you walk this path, will be tested by the gods. And know that all these tests that you are going to be facing, know that all the tests that you are facing are because you have been found worthy enough to even be tested. If you choose to walk away from this path now, there is no shame in that. But know that this is not the path for you, and I would advise you to very much stay away from it from here on out. So, what is this warrior path that I speak of? The warrior path, in a spiritual context, of course, because we are not discussing physical combat, nor would I ever claim to be a physical warrior in this life. It is a path, as mentioned, that is often associated with adversity and overcoming obstacles. It is to purify yourself, to destroy yourself 1,000 times over. To destroy yourself 1,000 times over so that you may rise up more purified and stronger than you were before. And in this, Balder will be our inspiration, for Balder overcame death itself. And that Rune victory, so below, the sun, this will be our guide. This will be what we ever strive to be as burning, as radiant, as strong and as powerful as the radiance of the sun, of soul itself. Until at the end, we too finally burn up and we die. That is what it is like to walk the warrior path. We must be strong in this. We must, however, also embrace compassion and mercy. We have to understand that there are people who are too weak or who are unable to fight for themselves. We have to understand that if we walk this path, we take on the responsibility of watching over our friends. A while ago, I made a pact with Heimdall, the Watcher, and I promised him that I would look after my friends. I told him that I would protect my friends, and I told him that if my friends were ever attacked, if my friends were ever touched, if my friends were ever even laid a finger on, I would cut off the finger. I would remove every single part that was necessary from those that would touch them. For there is no thing more valuable in this world than those that stand by you. Your brothers, your sisters, your kin, your family, your friends, those that you work with, those that love you, those that hold you dear. If you understand the Germanic and Norse traditions, you will know that that there is no stronger bond than the ties of blood and the ties that you form with those that are not necessarily your blood, but that become your spiritual blood. And so, we find this principle returning in Tiwaz, the rune of momentum. It means horse, the animal, horse. So, a horse is a loyal creature. It is a noble steed. It is something that needs to be taken care of, that needs to be treasured, that needs to be not just used, but honored and respected, with mutual respect and dignity. Like a warrior that rides his steed to battle, there needs to be a mutual trust and understanding for the animal to want to follow you, to want to listen and obey. And of course, they are, in ways, friends and allies that help us overcome adversity. I would therefore like to cite a personal example. Yesterday, as I was taking a bath, my roommate and friend suddenly told me that they were once again having strange pains, and I felt a strange energy again. Now, this most feeble hex faded after about 5 or 10 minutes. But of course, I would say that protecting your friends, protecting your kin, protecting your family, it should be very much a priority. However, those that are unwilling to help themselves, you need not bother with them. For if they have the capability but are simply too lazy, the gods do not respect those that are lazy, that are not willing to develop, that shy away from improving themselves, that shy away from analyzing their actions, that shy away from developing themselves, that shy away from questioning even their own motivations. This individual, for example, that froze these curses, because we now have verified that it is indeed the individual we suspected it was. This individual, to give you an example, and of course I shan't name any names because that would be unethical of me to do. That is business between them and myself and my friend, which was so needlessly involved. And again, whether it was meant for me or whether it was meant for my friend, I don't know. But the fact is, my friend had in fact very, very little to do with all of this. And someone so dear to you, to, as I have mentioned in another video, to see them be put through a curse that would have killed them within a couple days. Because make no mistake, this curse attacked the nervous system. It started to paralyze my friend. They could not move, they could not think straight, they could not properly see, they could not properly do almost anything but lay on the couch. And as soon as I put that spell that drew out the curse under their nose, and I put their hands on the appropriate place on the spell, they rejuvenated, they raised up, they could move again, they could speak again. As I have said many times before, magic works. However, this individual, because I did not feel that I had adequately explained it in Sowilo, and I did so with a purpose, because I very, very much felt that Tiwaz was the Rune to do this with. So, this individual had proven to be a very toxic, deceitful individual. They pretended to be a guide, a teacher, but then did thing after thing which took away power, which removed guides, which took away strengths and gifts and abilities, and misdirected efforts left and right. Not just with me, but with other friends I have. So this particular individual, whom we tried to peacefully cut off out of our lives, there was no magic done by us to this individual. There was no curses thrown by us. Just some words spoken amongst ourselves. We laughed about it, and we went on our merry way. We never spoke ill to this person. We never spoke any sort of thing, because we just backed off and we distanced ourselves, because we felt, maybe this individual did not mean for these things to happen. We gave them the benefit of the doubt, but this was not to be the case, because as I said a couple days ago, after we ignored these messages, this individual threw this curse at my best friend. So this individual, out of spite perhaps, or who knows for what reason, sent a curse either meant for me and it deflected off of my protections and ricocheted to my friend. Or they on purpose targeted my friend, even though my friend had nothing or almost nothing to do with it. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a prime example of what it does not mean to be on the warrior path. Because this is not just, and it is not in accordance to the laws and honorable conduct that one should follow. To strike someone out of jealousy with a curse just because you don't get your way is pathetic. It is pathetic and it is petty. And I have no respect for individuals who do that. And quite frankly, neither do the gods. And the old gods, they do not forgive or forget if you pass beyond a certain point. They are very tolerant people. They are good people. However, as they are our elder kin, a certain conduct is necessary and required. If you wish to walk with the gods, but you conduct yourself in a cowardly fashion, if you operate in such a manner that you strike individuals who are innocent, who technically have nothing to do with it, this is the kind of people that we protect those we love against. That is what Tiwaz taught me, the Rune and the God. That is what they taught me to do, to shield my friends and allies and my family, which my roommate is, because I chose them to be family. So, you want to know what the warrior path is, then meditate on Tiwaz. Listen to Tyr. Understand him, and understand what he stands for. Understand why he did what he did. Understand his sacrifice. And understand that to be a warrior in the spiritual sense does not mean that you can blindly go off and batter random individuals, or that you can use your curses, your magic to blindly curse like a 12-year-old in the height of hormonal rage does just because he couldn't get his way. The path of the warrior requires you to be responsible. It requires you to have self-restraint. It requires you to have restraint, to build up your rage, to build up your energy, to build up that divine madness, that Wod, that Wodanaz gave us so long ago when Wodanaz, who became Odin, was still young. This feeble hex, this weak curse, fell off after about 5 to 10 minutes. It subsided, even as I was setting up the ritual to draw it out. To me, this was proof that my counter magics to this individual worked. To me, this is proof, also considering that this same person posted a message that they were tired of violence, and that is a rough paraphrase, that they were above fighting, that they were above violence and conflict. Well, I am afraid that I have news for you. Existence is conflict. Those of us who walk this path will understand, and those who do not have the will to walk it, those of us who do not have the drive to walk it, to overcome adversity, they will not understand. The world needs healers. Those who walk this path are healers as well. Because in order to destroy yourself, to build yourself back up, you have to know how to regenerate. Burkano, Lagus. Regeneration and growth, healing, cleansing. The runes that are invaluable to those who walk on the path of spiritual healing. The third eight contains so much wisdom. The third eight contains such a variety of power. The third eight is the eight in which we are assuming our roles, in which we are assuming our true identities as spiritual workers. Now that we as people have been purified and tested, now that we have been put through the scourging fire from the sun itself, now that we march under the banner of victory of Sowilo, we can truly become who we were meant to be. So if you decide in rage to seek conflict with someone unjustly, and then when it turns out that your efforts are fruitless, you cannot just walk away from that. Let him who is without sin cast the first stone, Christ said. It may be a Christian principle, but it does adhere to this path because, as I said, restraint is necessary. If you call yourself a spiritual warrior, it does not give you license to go around picking fights with people or cursing them just because you're a little bit ticked off for whatever reasons, no matter how petty they may be. If there is something truly justifiable, such as abuse by a parent, whether that is sexual or violently, those are, in my opinion, perfectly fine reasons to curse. Because they damage and harm and scar for life a being who is in its infancy, who is supposed to be nurtured and loved. Those are examples of situations where I think it is justified to be the first to throw a curse. But people who don't agree with your viewpoint, not wanting to associate with you anymore, is a prime example of what you should not be doing. So to the person that gave me this lesson, thank you so much for being my teacher one last time. And thank you for displaying the traits you did, because it makes excellent educational material. Responsibility for our actions. This is another thing that Tiwaz teaches us. We know that we have power now. We know that magic works. We have been initiated into the first 16 runes. Perfro has shown us the interaction between decisions that we make and decisions being made for us. It made us understand the web of weird, the laws of Orlog, the primal cause. Do you know what the primal cause caused? Conflict. It caused conflict, evolution. The false light of Christian doctrine that states that there should never be conflict, except, of course, by the judgment of its God, denies the very essence of existence on the physical plane. Even in the spirit world there is conflict. No, especially in the spirit world there is conflict. Speak to spirits. Understand that the grand work of purification of creation is never done. It must always continue until it reaches its climax. No pun intended. That is what it means to walk the warrior path, to embrace that chaos, to embrace that change, to be okay with things not being okay, but to take control, to purify yourself, to purify things around you, to be able to understand that there is a time for peace and a time for conflict. The duality of justice and law, order, and on the other hand, war or chaos. That duality that Tyr has in his domains is a prime example of what it means to walk this path. It does not mean that you are a bloodthirsty savage that goes around randomly killing people or slinging curses. Don't worry. It's not the path of psychosis and mass murder, unlike a specific deity that is running rampant in the world today. His name is Yahweh. Because more people are killed in the name of Yahweh every single day, or in the name of Allah, than there likely were under the Germanic gods in years. But yet, somehow, Christianity and Islam and Judaism are seen as religions of peace and love. They are not. Read the holy books. The hypocrisy should come to light. Which brings me to the next point. Enslavement. Those of us that walk this path are not slaves to conflict. Those of us that are meant to walk this path are meant to master it, to use it as an instrument of transmutation, to take something and to channel it until it has become something that it was not before, to purify it, to strengthen it, to use it for our development, to give it a positive influence in life, to assist with mankind's evolution, whether that is on a local scale or beyond. The gods did not get where they are today without some form of conflict. Morrigan, from the Celtic Irish pantheon, is a prime example. She was said to be human at one point. She was not afraid of conflict. She still isn't. She is a goddess of war and death, of magic, just like Odin. They are very similar in many respects, and I respect both of them greatly. This does not mean that they are evil. This is another Christian lie. A lie, by the way, that was constructed to keep people docile. This is another lesson that Tiwaz teaches us, that the duality of order and chaos exist for a reason, because they form a beautiful instrument of transmutation when they are mixed together. They help push us as individuals, they help push us as a species to become greater, to learn from things. And this kind of conflict, and again, this does not necessarily have to constitute physical conflict, spiritual conflict. It does not have to be a bad thing. And I find it amusing that the individual that I spoke of earlier is nothing but a pawn in the chess game of the gods. For this individual is being used to initiate me into this room. But they may not understand that. And so, if you wish to walk this path, you must understand that the gods you work with, they may sometimes almost seem to turn against you in order to test you, to prove to yourself that you are strong enough. Mine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, Yahweh says. Mine, all mine. I will judge, I will exact revenge, I will carry out retribution, Yahweh says. You all need to sit there and worship me. You are supposed to pray for justice. You are supposed to beg Yahweh or Allah, hoping that somehow the pedophile that molested you when you were 4 or 5 will have their retribution. Hoping, maybe even in a next incarnation, that that sick fuck will get their reward. But it doesn't happen, does it? You are promised that they will burn in hell. And it is likely that you will burn beside them. Why? Because if you become enraged and you have a messed up mind, understandably, from the trauma that you incurred as a child, you will start acting out in violent ways, in strange sexual ways, and commit yourself to things that Yahweh will not like. So, contempt and unsatisfied cravings for justice will forever bury themselves in your mind and in your heart. Tiwaz, Tyr, says that justice needs to come. The old gods, they do not forget or forgive. Because if you pass to the point where you don't receive their forgiveness, then you are likely already a lost cause. Making mistakes is fine, encouraged. Doing intentional evil without good reason, which is a very important difference, without good reason, that is different. There is a difference there that is hopefully clear. So, retribution is not to be feared. It is to be exacted. Because the law requires it. Justice requires it. So sometimes, those of us on the warrior path meet a beautiful 20, 30-something-year-old woman. And she tells you about how this sick old man touched her in inappropriate places. And she still suffers from it. Sometimes justice is a little slow. But it was so long ago. They still destroyed a life. They still caused someone to suffer from it 2 decades later. By all means, grab your coffin nails. By all means, sling your curses. That is justice. But slinging a curse because you had a small falling out with someone, or because they, felt they didn't want to associate with you anymore because of deferring life paths, is not justice. Tiwaz also teaches that honesty and openness about what you do is required. It is a honorable thing to stand tall with head held high. It is an honorable thing to empower yourself like that. It is an honorable thing to be confident in who and what you are, and you should be. But there should always be that element of self-sacrifice. Because if you just empower yourself, and you just take and take and take, you become a parasite. You don't give back, then you end up like this individual, and you will bitterly do things that are not just. You will become that very person that you think you are condemning. So this too was taught to me by this rune Tiwaz. But of course, the runes are not owned by Odin. The runes are not created by Odin. The runes are the universal forces at work. I hope that you understand this by now. Odin governs the runes, he does not rule them. Difference. Odin had to sacrifice for the runes, just like you and me. Of course on a grander level, because he can sacrifice a whole lot more than me. And if you, like Odin, like Tyr, are not willing to sacrifice, and that sacrifice can take any form, then you are not worthy of walking this path. If you are not willing to stand against those that would harm those that are innocent, then you are not fit for this path. It is understood, yes, not everybody is capable or willing. That's fine. But if you are called to this, do so with dignity and understand that at times you, like Tyr, will sometimes have to sit in judgment of people. Because that is your responsibility as someone that now holds power. That is what it means to be one step closer to understanding the thoughts of the gods. That is something that they deal with every day. And if you, my friend, want to reach that, if that is what you are aiming for, if you do not want to be recycled, as it were, then these are responsibilities that you need to start assuming. And even if you walk the path of the healer or some other path that is a archetype, as I would call it, even on those paths you will have to make these kinds of decisions from time to time. There is no being alive or dead in this universe that can totally, truly be ascetic all the time. Because there will always be people or individuals or even nations and groups that will threaten people who just want to be left alone, who just want to live their lives, who just want to improve themselves. So don't think that this path, as I said, requires that you can, or gives you a license, I should say, to just get up and start exerting your power over everybody. You have a right to exert your power over those that would seek to destroy you or those that you love. Because then you are acting in defense, and you are acting to prevent something worse from happening. Make no mistake, this is a path that Tiwaz shows us. That is very much a path in service to people, like the gods are in service to people. Power is a means to an end. Recognize there are greater things than yourself. Honor them. Respect them. Work with them. Assist them and help them. But like the left-hand path, seek to empower yourself. Seek to raise yourself up. When you step on this path, know that you can use your rage and you should use your rage. Understand, however, that it is not a rage of mad bloodlust, as I have mentioned several times. It is a rage that you use that has been building up inside of you because of injustices that have been committed either to yourself or to others, and you use it, you harness it, you build it up, and then you release it, and your goal is accomplished. Think of it as the divine Vodanaz, bringer of the rage. The berserker rage is what they would call it. A trance-like state in which everything is enhanced, in which everything is amplified, in which everything around you just starts making sense, in which everything around you becomes part of the greater whole, in which everything just seems to connect. It seems to make things so clear. It is to be as though you are one with nature itself. It is to be as though all these preconditioned fears and dogmas are stripped away, and it is as though you are truly at one with evolution. So like these ancient warrior shamans, we learn to harness and control that divine rage, that divine madness. Although, can it truly be madness if we learn to harness it? Can it truly be madness if we learn to control it? It is to use that in our magics. It is to use that to assist and empower, not to bring mindless death to everything around us. It is not to mindlessly destroy the lives of other people, as this individual tried to do to my best friend. And yet then, to have the audacity of claiming that they hate conflict. This is not what Tiwaz stands for. Tiwaz is just cause. Tiwaz is to fight for what is right. However, most people these days, because of the aforementioned reasons, because vengeance belongs to the Abrahamic God. Vengeance belongs to him and only him. This is not how the ways of old were. Justice needed to be meted out. But so far we have only talked about this path, and so far we have only talked about justice and warfare, and when it is sanctioned and approved of to use offensive and combative methods. But of course there is so much more to this rune than just that. It is a rune that symbolizes the masculine principles, along with Ingwaz and Uruz. They are very masculine runes. They are focused on male sexuality, and even from its very shape, like Perfro, it kind of reminded us of a vulva, a vagina, in its shape. And so Tiwaz looks like a phallus if you look at it in a certain way. And so Tiwaz also represents the ancient societal ideal where it was the job of men to protect and to make sure that the women and children were provided for and fought for, protected, to make sure that those that we love, our families, that they are aided, that they are assisted, that they are fed and clothed, and thus Tiwaz also shows us the responsibility for what we do in life. It shows us that sometimes we just need to do what needs to be done, no matter if we like it or not. Again, this calls back to self-sacrifice. However, I feel that Tiwaz is less so than Uruz and Ingwaz about the sexual aspects. I mean, we discussed Perfro, and there too I came to the same conclusion that despite these runes looking like the genitalia of male and female, that they embody these principles. And of course, doing what needs to be done first requires us to strip away our own inner limitations and our own inner programming of old dogma and of religious bullshit that has not served a single person in the acquisition of justice throughout lifetimes. Really, even though you may not carry physical arms in this life, and if magic is your tool of choice, is the way in which you fight, as it is mine, know that these tools can be wielded for protection and defense. Know that it can be used as a tool of offense when needed, but also know that, as we have discussed, with such power comes responsibility. Now, of course, that may remind some of you of a very cheesy quote from a certain movie. However, sometimes on this path you will come across consequences for your actions, and sometimes these consequences may require you to do internal work first before carrying them out. You see, if you engage in something along the lines of protecting your loved ones, if you need to fend off an attacker in whatever way, shape, or form, of course, and in this case we may be discussing magically, are you prepared to do what needs to be done in order to see things through to their conclusion proper? There is a lot of internal barriers that one needs to strip away that have been programmed into us in order to be able to look at things objectively and to sit in judgment like the gods do. Sometimes we personally may not have an issue with someone. For example, to cite that example that I cited earlier of the creepy old pedophile that touched a woman that you know, and she's coming to you and she's asking for your help. will you do what is asked of you in order to see that judgment and justice is served? And now, if you have objections to using magic to that kind of end, please return to the right-hand path. You cannot walk this road if you are restricted by such dogma. If you are comforting yourself, even though you know you have the power and capability to make a sick individual like that pay, but you stand by and do nothing. Maybe even have them go on to do it again and again and again. Are you capable and willing to sit in judgment? Are you capable of bearing that burden? Is your back, are your shoulders strong enough? That is something that everybody needs to ask themselves. And it's not, of course, just talking about a magical application. It is also something that should be thought of and discussed in everyday life. Am I willing to bear responsibilities and the associated consequences of my actions? Because make no mistake, if you do not do that kind of internal work beforehand, if you are not willing to subjugate yourself to this kind of honest, introspective scrutiny of the self and of what baggage that you carry with you that would only slow you down, that would only hinder you and make you feel needlessly immobile. If you don't strip all that away, then you are going to hit a dead end soon, and sooner or later you are going to come across something or someone, a spirit, another magician, or hell, maybe even life itself will throw something in your path just to say, told you so. To walk on this path with doubt in your heart, to not have fully listened to the lessons that Tyr teaches us through Tiwaz, his rune, in all aspects, is to have a weak shield arm. The moment an opponent strikes the shield, you falter. You're not willing to block or parry, or the moment that you should go in for the final blow, whether that is a figurative final blow, or perhaps in dealing with certain unpleasant magical individuals who practice the arcane arts. If you do not end the game when it needs to end, if you don't complete the dance as it should, I hope that it will not come back to bite you. Such is the weight of those that wish to have power. Whether it is to be on the warrior path, the path of the healer, or any other path that you could walk on spiritually. Because make no mistake, if you want to walk the path of the healer, and you do not take very, very high amounts of care in how you use your magic to heal, in what words you use, in what direction you make those that you are trying to help go, it can lead to disastrous consequences. That is why I study psychology, because I feel the need to understand the human mind more. Because I feel the need to be able to dissect someone's mind and understand where they're coming from, what their motivations are, and why they do what they do. And as I said, even those on this path must be able to heal. Because if you cannot heal, my friend, how are you going to heal yourself after you have sacrificed of yourself like Tyr did? And sure, you may say, I bear the wound with pride, and you should. But you want to be able to rise above. And you want to be able to, like Balder, as we discussed, be able to even overcome death itself, so that even in death you find victory. The Einherjar are a great example, as I have cited in the other video as well. Those that fought physical battles and then rose above, they became something greater than they were in life. The path of the spiritual warrior encourages us, needs us to embrace a kind of divine madness, controlled madness, as we have already discussed. We dance a dance of death with the one-eyed king, who tests our worthiness and our strength. And he will. He's already doing it to me. And I love it. I need it. Because Odin, who is the one-eyed king, of course, he understands that in order for someone to grow, they need to be put through trials. They need to be put through tribulation. Because if you don't, you will be unprepared for what is to come. And if you don't, if you can't make it, then you weren't worthy. And if you can make it, then you were worthy, obviously. But the trials will never stop, they will never cease, because you need to be in motion. You need to keep dancing. You need to keep on fighting. And if that word still triggers a sort of, oh no, violence reaction in you, then you are not suited to this path. If you can't find some sort of peace in the center of chaos, then you should not engage with this. And that's fine. Everybody has their calling, after all. And we will be discussing other paths with the other runes that we will be facing in the third aid. There are many things in life which we can pursue, which we can do. Know that Odin doesn't test us because he is sadistic. He tests us like he himself has been tested many times over. He tests us because not only do we prove to him that we are capable of working with him, but he also does it because he wants to show us that we are capable of so much more than we think. Manas is a rune that will deal with those kinds of things as well. Manas is a very, very interesting rune. It deals with the self, with who we truly are, at our very core, and the unity of all our energies, of all our bodies, of all our parts of existence. And of course, we don't need to do all these things alone, Tiwaz. We should not do all things alone. We need friends and allies. We're all a part of the great divine creator. And some expressions we get along with, and some we don't. Value those that we do get along with. So now that we have discussed the essence of what the rune Tiwaz means in its various aspects, and the reason this is so long is because I feel obviously that it very strongly applies to the path that I personally walk. But there is of course the divination part, which is an integral part to this series. So we shall be moving on to that now. Perhaps a somewhat lighter topic and perhaps more informative for those of you that are here mostly for the divination part. However, of course, in order for you to use a rune effectively in divination, it is necessary that you understand the principles behind it. So, Tiwaz upright. Tiwaz upright in divination implies protection, so long as you are, of course, willing to do your part, and that you are willing to undertake what you need to undertake in order to, see something through to the end. It calls us, as mentioned, to be responsible for our own actions. It causes us to own up to what we have sown. It causes us to reap what we have sown and do so in a honest, honorable manner. And we are not to shy away from duty. That is another meaning that this rune has when it shows up in a divination spread. It implies that we are not to shy away from receiving and exacting justice, to adhere to proper conduct, to adhere to law. Especially the latter is, of course, applicable to legal matters. So long as we adhere to these things, we will have victory, as was mentioned in the beginning of the video. So, if you have an issue and you are looking for protection and you know that you are in the right, or you very strongly suspect that you are right, then Tiwaz is the protection rune for you in this particular case. So Tiwaz is a protection rune, but it is not so much a generic quote-unquote protection rune like Tiwaz is against magic, or Algis is against forces outside of ourselves, or that Furisas is against maliciousness and chaos specific. So long as we adhere to these things, we shall have victory. We are, in fact, assured of victory, because if this rune appears in your divination spread concerning, again, legal matters, or if it concerns some slight that has been committed against you, some malicious action that someone else has taken against you, and Tiwaz shows up in this, then it is basically a sign that says you are in the right, you are, depending of course on how you phrase the question, because if you phrase the question in a certain manner that relates to their point of view, for example, and you see Tiwaz in that context, and of course that is a different matter. You should of course use prudence and use your intuition to properly interpret Tiwaz in this setting. Tiwaz, as has been said, is a rune that you often see in conflicts and disputes, in legality issues, etc. So Tiwaz also represents self-sacrifice, as has also been mentioned repeatedly throughout this video, especially in its upright position, because self-sacrifice is something that is seen as noble, good, and just, and that will help our fellow human being. It will help our friends, our family, our community. And these are things that are good in Tyr's eyes. And sometimes self-sacrifice can be as simple as paying back the debts that you owe to a friend. Sometimes it has a strong correlation to Gabo in that sense, of course, where Gabo says that a gift always requires a gift in return. And a debt is that you incur with someone is in essence a temporary gift to you, but you also owe them in a more direct sense. And so you may have to make a sacrifice and pay them back. This may be, for example, the case if your friend is suddenly in a financial bind and you borrowed $100 from them or something last month, and they are now in a financial bind, and you have $150 left, and you are going to buy concert tickets or something like that. What do? Are you going to help your friend out of a bind, or are you going to satisfy your own desires and go to a concert? That's the kind of thing that you could probably see Tiwaz in that sense. It can be also an indication that we are to judge fairly. This does, of course, not mean that we are to go softly on someone or something if they have it coming, if they truly have it coming. However, there is, of course, a requirement that you judge fairly, and the punishment must, as always, fit the crime. So Tiwaz may therefore imply that, if someone has slighted you, and it was a small slight, you are to act justly, you are to consider your options, you are to consider your the person that is the offending party, you are to consider their motives, the reason why they did it. You are to analyze this, you are to use your mind, you are to weigh the scales of judgment in your mind, and you are to draw a conclusion. And of course, the principle of the way you judge, others will judge you, should be kept in the back of your mind here, because it is uncalled for to punish someone severely if they have only called you names a couple times or something like that, like putting a death curse on someone because they insulted your kids last week. That's a little overboard. And you should also take into account, for example, what mental state was that person in? How would I like it if I said something that I later regretted and somebody were to put a death curse on me, These are things that you have to consider. These are things that you have to weigh in your mind. How would I feel about this? Is this just? or would I want people to show mercy on me? Am I prepared to offer my forgiveness, to offer my apologies and ask for their forgiveness? Because at the end of the day, this was a stupid mistake on my part, etc. So Tiwaz, it fittingly initiates us into a new, higher understanding of the world and its mechanism. And what I mean by that is that the laws of the spiritual world are not the laws of our world in which we currently live. We of course have to abide by, the laws under which we currently live in the physical world. However, the spirit world functions a little differently, and meditating on Tiwaz in that sense, in finding out how things are handled in the spirit world. For example, my other series, Excarnating the Lamb, talks about spiritual contracts, which is not something that I feel is personally well known enough amongst the metaphysical crowd, the metaphysical community, because it is a very important thing. I have often made the statement throughout these videos that where I say that the spirit world in essence runs on contracts, and this is, from what I have seen, very much true. And because your word is your bond, and if you can't, for some reason, fulfill that word or that promise, in some situations there are, depending on the spirit and depending on negotiations, it depends on how that is handled. However, in general, spiritual contracts are very much a binding matter, and they will be enforced no matter how much you don't like it, or even if you don't know about it because it happened in a previous incarnation or something like that, and you still have that contract attached to you, as I found out for myself. And yes, there are usually ways of getting out of it, but these things all involve legalities, these things all involve matters, and these are all things that you should be taking into consideration, basically, when you are interpreting Tiwaz, when it is in its upright position, that it involves oftentimes legalities, justice, that it involves conflicts, disputes, stuff like that. Another possible meaning for Tiwaz appearing upright is that courage may be required in the given situation, being inquired about. It may also imply that there may be an upcoming test, as is something that I have also discussed in the last part of the general discussion section of Tiwaz. And again, even in this particular sense, it still implies that your victory is assured so long as your heart is in it, so long as that you are in the right for doing these particular things. And consequently, Tiwaz is also the rune of perseverance in that sense. It requires this aspect of us in order to initiate us, in order to have us understand that persistence is necessary if we wish to have a given outcome, if we want to see the changes or the matters that we are pursuing come to their fruition. And lastly, as mentioned, Tiwaz is also a rune associated with male sexuality, with masculine principles. So in the context of, reading to do with love or sexual issues, this may be of import if the particular reading, if the particular question calls for it. An example of seeing Tiwaz upright in divination would be the following. So suppose that one is engaged in a legal matter, such as a custody battle. Your spouse is an abusive individual, or your ex-spouse, I should say, is an abusive individual and has, abused both your children and yourself on multiple occasions. And let's assume that it, is talking about physical violence in this matter. Okay, so you are in the right because this individual is a violent individual, an abusive individual, but the court case is, for whatever reason, hard fought. And there is a lot of uncertainty on whether or not you are actually going to win this custody battle. So you are meeting a lot of resistance and backlash for, again, whatever reason. However, you are in the right and that your ex-spouse most assuredly should not have custody of the children because you have experienced firsthand the abuse of your now ex-spouse. So you come home one stormy afternoon and you cast some runes on this, okay? And Tiwaz is the rune that shows up in the challenge slot with Sowilo as the future and or outcome rune or something. So you are guaranteed a victory if you proceed with what you are doing, if you persevere, if you keep on fighting, and in this case you are in the right. And if you keep this up, then you will find that victory will be yours. So what does Tiwaz upright mean in a spiritual context? Now, of course, I have already spoken at length on this particular topic, really. However, there is still a little more to be said, which I reserved on purpose for this particular portion. So, Tiwaz, it being the rune of law and justice, speaks to us on how we should conduct ourselves in an honorable fashion. Because of this, it should be understood that when we have meditated on Tiwaz, that casting that proverbial first stone is not something we should be doing, quite frankly, because we'll end up being the culprit. We'll end up being the villain in this case, because unprovoked we attacked, and even if you were provoked a little bit, severely overreacting and escalating to the point where it comes to violence. For example, if somebody, again, as I said, somebody insults you last week, or insulted you last week, and you throw a death curse at them, it's the punishment doesn't fit the crime. The punishment is way overkill. So in that sense, we would lose the right to say that we are defending ourselves, and we would simply not be behaving with just conduct. In fact, I would go so far as to say that it would be honorless to do so. It would be a very amoral, immoral kind of deal. And even more so if we cast the first stone and then, because we are afraid of the consequences, we suddenly cower and then we retreat and turn around from our course of action. We don't apologize, but we slink back into the shadows. And then we try to avoid responsibility. We don't want to face our actions. Of course, such people are not looked on too favorably by most people, nor should they be. Because, of course, depending on the severity of what someone has done, if it involves threatening someone's lives or abusing one's children in whatever manner, if it involves abusing one's spouse, if it involves all these life-shattering, altering things, these are the worthless ones. These are the oath breakers, the murderers, those that do evil. These are despised by the gods. They are set to end up in Nostrum, if I pronounce that correctly. That is basically where the worthless dead go. As I mentioned, the oath-breakers, the murderers, those that do evil. That is not what Tyr stands for. To honor Tyr is to be an honorable individual. To honor Tyr is to adhere to proper conduct, to respecting your fellow man, to show respect for the law, to show respect for those that justly carry out the law. And of course I say justly because there are certain things going on in the world today that should not be happening in regards to law enforcement. However, again, Tyr also stands for maintaining one's dignity and the dignity of those around them. Tyr stands for self-sacrifice, for courage, and a willingness to defend yourself and those around you that you hold dear. We come then to Tiwaz converse in divination and what it may mean if you see this rune appear in your divination spread in converse. Now, to see Tiwaz converse is not a bad thing in and of itself, actually. In fact, it may indicate that hidden below the surface you have certain abilities, skills, attributes that you have not discovered in yourself yet. In other words, if you see Tiwaz converse, what that basically means is that the rune is saying to you, listen, my friend, you want certain things and you can have them. However, there is internal work required. Destruction of certain old portions of your personality that are holding you back, whether that be the destruction of certain programming, whether that be the destruction of, certain mental blockages that you have, whether it be the discovering of new attributes and blockages that you thought were new but are not actually new, that have always lingered and hidden themselves below the surface, usually hiding just behind those blockages you need to destroy. And these are traits that include but are not limited to having hidden talents of leadership, inspiring others, becoming a paragon to other people around you. You want to empower people, stuff like that. You may find that you are a very good motivational speaker, or you may find that you naturally inspire loyalty in others, things like that. Maybe you find that you are a great public speaker. Maybe you find out that you are a good therapist. Maybe you find out that you are someone who naturally comforts others. These are but a very short list of the kinds of things that Tiwaz may want you to discover in yourself. So when you see a converse Tiwaz in a reading, and as always depending on the context of the reading, this means that you should be developing yourself, in particular in relation to this specific topic you are inquiring about. So what is an example of that? Tiwaz in converse could show up if you are inquiring about a specific issue that you feel a lot of fear towards. So perhaps, if you're thinking about asking someone on a date, and suppose that you have a crush on them, but you are, afraid to ask them out for whatever reason, which, it's not easy for a lot of people to do that. So it could be in this scenario that if you do a room reading on it, that converse Tiwaz could show up and basically just give you advice like, hey, look, there isn't something magical that's going to happen unless you make something like that happen. But the way the situation's going right now, unless you do something about it, you're gonna have to man or woman up and approach the other person and ask them out or get to know them a little better at the very least. So in this case, Tiwaz in Converse would show up in the challenge slot, and it would be a challenge for you to overcome these blockages, to start developing something, you know? And this, of course, also means that after you've done it once, the next time you do it, it becomes less fear-inducing, less scary, and the next time you do it, it becomes even less scary, and so on and so forth. So Tiwa converse in a spiritual meaning. What does it mean to me? So just like with the divination meaning, Tiwa in converse. It deals with our hidden talents. It deals with our hidden abilities. It takes bravery. It takes strength. It takes courage to go against the norm. We empower ourselves as spiritual beings and as physical individuals to have the power to go against the grain and then to come out on top. But in order for us to do that, we first need to, as said, strip away blockages. We need to make ourselves better people, refining the metal, as it were, putting ourselves through the forge and crucible of creation, of existence, and becoming stronger, better, more equipped people to handle things. It teaches us that somewhere within we have the willpower and the energy necessary to become our own person, to achieve individuality, while also honoring the other individuals around us. And all that needs to happen is the destruction of the barriers and prisons that are in our minds or in our hearts that hold such energy inside and that contain it. And often we will find that it's mostly old beliefs and constraints, whether that's the result of our upbringing or whether it's the stale religion that we grew up in that offers us no true peace or comfort, and other situations like that that are the culprits of such particular blockages, of such particular um, hindrances. However, with all that said and done, we can never truly, once we have found out that the blockages are there, blame such factors in and of themselves if we are not willing to work on it. Now, of course, what that means is that you have to start actively working on ridding yourselves of these blockages. Because not to do so and then still complaining about it when you already know they're there is, of course, quite frankly, idiotic. If they're bothering you that much and you're not actively working on it, then why are you complaining? So after all that is said and done, after we have stripped away these blockages and after we have empowered ourselves, we may come to a different layer of blockages. We may come to a different kind of programming that goes even deeper, even more deep-seated. And this, I personally found out, is especially the case with religious dogma. It is a layer upon layer upon layer of programming and indoctrination that some of you may have even had since birth. And these deepest, the ones that are most deep-seated, will often be the ones that involve one's self-esteem, one's patterns of thinking. Am I an evil person if I take pride in who I am? Am I a prideful person if I like myself? Am I a worthy individual to question the laws of God? The answer to the first two is no. And questioning any law should be the case. Because a law can be unjust. A law can be a law, but that doesn't necessarily make it a right law. Now, of course, Tyr is, or Tiwaz, the rune, is a representation of law and of judgment. But that does not necessarily mean that all laws are right or just or fair. So these things too we have to strip, and then we have to look towards a new law, a different law. Because if enough people disagree with a certain law, over time a law likely will be changed. Now, of course, nobody disagrees with laws such as don't murder random people in the street, which is a good thing, because you shouldn't murder random people in the street, because that very much infringes on people's free will, and it causes a lot of depression and sadness and grief. But if a law states that you are to give 90% of your income to your feudal lord, and you get to feast on the scraps of, you know, whatever's left, and you have 5 kids, one has to question how just is the fact that I break my back day and night working the fields, and the lord who sits in his castle gets absolutely everything I do or make or create, and I get to live off of half-rotten fruit or whatever you do on your farm or in your given profession and craft. Then that may be a law, but that law may not necessarily be just, of course. So that is something that should also be kept in mind. Lastly, we then come to Tiwaz reversed. Tiwaz reversed means that we are lacking courage, that we are lacking bravery, that we are lacking inner strength, that the decisions being made by us or around us or whoever is being inquired about are foolish at best and lack any sort of true understanding and or substance. Cowardice, weakness, these are things that are at the order of the day, as I would put it. You may be manipulated, you may be deceived, you may be unwilling to stand up to yourself. Now, keep in mind, I am using the term unwilling, the word unwilling, uh, not unable, because there are situations in which you are unable to stand up for yourself. Because, you know, if you are a 4-year-old girl and daddy beats the fuck out of you every day, yeah, you are unable to stand up against a grown man if you are a 4-year-old kid, right? So that is different from being unwilling to stand up for yourself. Someone who is faced with a reverse Tiwaz is someone who is dense, who is quite frankly stupid and a coward. Reverse Tiwaz is a rune that you don't really want to see in, you know, specific contexts. It's a very straightforward message. So, you know, you may be lacking clear intent, clear will. You may not have proper direction, whether that be in life in general or the specific topic being inquired about. So foolishness and weakness need to be overcome if you wish to see a reversal in this situation. Or failure is going to be likely. So it could alternatively also mean that the person being inquired about, whether that may be you or someone else, is acting in a dishonorable and or unlawful manner. And of course, as we have discussed, this concerns just law, because Tyr is also the god of justice. So that means that he is the god of just laws, not necessarily of laws, period. So, if someone is acting in a dishonorable and or unlawful manner, this will obviously not be for the benefit of anyone involved, except, of course, perhaps the individual acting out in such a manner. To cite an example of what Tiwaz reversed could be in a rune reading, it could be seen in a rune reading where you are dealing with a situation you have not taken care of something properly, like you were supposed to file for your taxes 6 months ago and you didn't do it, and this is now coming back to bite you in the ass. And so, you do a rune reading on this, and Tiwaz reversed will likely be in the past slot, or in the issue slot. So of course this, in this case, means that the damage has already been done, but Tiwaz reverse here therefore would be indicating that it was due to your own stupidity, faults, etc., that these things went awry. And this is of course saying that there were like no massive traumatic events or something along those lines, right? I mean, there are situations, though very likely exceptional, in which case you may have completely forgotten or overlooked this. So Tiwaz reverse finally, and its potential spiritual meaning. Tiwaz reverse in a spiritual sense indicates a lack of direction, as I mentioned. And whether this came about due to your own volition or through the manipulation, of some other foreign entity, and this can be another human, etc., in whatever way, shape, or form, it may mean that you were too foolish to question what you were told to believe. And this is not limiting itself to foolishness. It may even have been out of fear. Because keep in mind, he was reversed is a rune of cowardice. So if you are not willing to look at your religious beliefs and examine them, or if you are not willing to question other beliefs you may hold, and you are keeping yourself stuck in essence, if you are not willing to dictate your own life in such a manner, then this may be a application for Tiwaz reverse. It may mean that you were wanting to believe something because it brought you comfort rather than, being willing to stand up and facing the truth. Tiwaz is the abandonment of this. Tiwaz reversed is the abandonment of the self, the abandonment of others, abandonment of the warrior path. If you are walking on it, and if you have rejected it out of fear rather than saying this is not my path. If it is something that you failed to follow through because you said this is who I want to be and this is where I want to walk in life, and then you turned around and said, I can't quite handle this. So in this sense, as crude as the message may be, it's still the truth. If you can't handle it, then this rune also stands for that. And of course this is the case with every path. If you are a healer, someone who exclusively or mainly focuses on healing other people in a spiritual sense, and you somehow change your mind and you think to yourself, you know what, I really want to be a lot more selfish. Well, this is the path that you initially chose. This is the path you wanted to be on, and now you are turning away. Did you not inform yourself properly of what you were getting into? Was this not the path that you felt called to? Are you now abandoning the mission, the purpose that you have taken on yourself? That is that is something you should be asking yourself before you engage on certain things, on certain paths. And of course, like I said, we all have our own callings, and to turn away from our calling is where weakness and foolishness lies. If you are a spiritual warrior, you must know why you fight before you start fighting. Because if you do not have a cause for which you fight, the existence of the individual spiritual warrior, and indeed the existence of your path itself, it's meaningless. You know, you need to have a sort of a cause inspired by, you know, the examples and the justice of Tyr or Tiwaz, where we walk that path of self-sacrifice. Did you not understand that that is what you were getting into? Did you not understand that once you accepted this path that you have felt called to, likely from day one that you picked up the runes? I know I was. I knew when I was a small child that this is roughly the path on which I would end up, even though I denied it to myself due to eventual religious indoctrination. But I always knew who and what I was meant to be. Because again, knowing when to strike, knowing when to apply our internal transmutation, knowing when to apply it to the world around us, knowing what to target, when and why, and knowing when to take away something that is no longer of use, leaving behind unnecessary burdens, unnecessary baggage, whether that is mental, whether that is in our hearts, whether that is anywhere else, whether that is people that no longer serve our goal, our lives, whether these people have become toxic or have always been toxic, whether these people have been misguiding us, whether these people have been teaching us nothing but the hatred. And that is another thing that maybe I should have mentioned earlier. To walk this spiritual warrior path, it is not a path of hatred. It is a path of love. It is a path of love not just for yourself, it is a path of love for all those who love you. It is a path that you walk not because you want to be a homicidal maniac in a spiritual sense where you're just going fling a curse here, fling a curse there, I overcome all opposition. That's not how that fucking works. This is not why you do that, because that is not a spiritual warrior. That is a bloodthirsty maniacal monster. That is not someone that is going to be loved and wanted, and likely not someone who's going to live very long. So if you, and these will be my last words on this video, this is something that should be understood no matter what kinds of paths you feel called to. And you know, there are many ways in which these things can express themselves. There are many applications such things have, but I'm of course calling these things based on certain archetypes that exist in spiritual works, like, you know, the path of the healer, path of the warrior shaman, stuff like that. It all comes down in the end to how you approach things, to how you deal with problems, what your personality is, what your talents are, what your gifts are in a spiritual sense. What do you feel called to? What do you feel empowered by? What is the symbolism, the kind of symbolism that you like using? I mean, if I, you know, um, it differs on so many levels and factors on why people feel called to the things that they feel called to, and this just happens to be mine, which is why this video is so fucking long. And my apologies for that if you have made it all the way. I mean, I'm offering you my apologies, but I regret nothing. So maybe I shouldn't apologize to you. I don't really feel that I have given Tiwaz any more or less love in and of itself for in regards to the rune itself. It is just something that because I personally connected with it, felt I needed to share my particular findings with you guys. But lastly, I will say this. It took me years and years sifting through new age bullshit, sifting through false light teachers and guides, people that told me anything with certain connotations relating to anger, which is, a perfectly natural human emotion to feel, anything pertaining to embracing chaos, anything pertaining to embracing any form of warfare. You are dealing with gods who are very open about the fact that warfare exists in their world. So I find it peculiar that there are so many people who would claim that calling yourself a spiritual warrior, or, even though it's not at all a bad thing as we have discussed, I feel it is a very noble thing, actually. I feel it is something that more people should be doing because there aren't enough people who protect others in this world nowadays. There aren't enough people who are looking out for other individuals. There aren't enough people who are doing that on a magical basis. There aren't enough people who are doing that from a magical standpoint. And this is why I said in Sowilo that if you feel called to a particular path, I want you to embrace it. And this happens to be mine. If you want to be a healer, if you like healing people, if you like mending their wounds, I love it. Please do. There are people, plenty of them, who are only in it for themselves. And these are the kinds of people that prey on people that can't defend themselves. So this is something people should take into account. Sometimes conflict, no, not sometimes, conflict is always necessary for development throughout all of creation. If the world was love and peace and light at every turn, then why the fuck are we even on this rock? If there was nothing to learn, if there was nothing to go through, if there was nothing to transmute, if there was nothing to purify, then why are we even living physical lives? Why do we even choose to incarnate on planet Earth third dimension? Why do I see angelic beings who are clad in armor, who carry weapons? Why do I see spirits all over that engage in some form of warfare and or conflict. It is an integral part of life. And to deny that is to deny a very big part of creation itself. Because without conflict, we won't grow. Without growth, without change, without experiencing the things on this planet, life would be pointless. Think about it. What is life's ultimate goal to you? What do you want to get out of life? When you pass from this rock, from this beautiful planet, what do you want to leave behind to your children and your children's children? That is part of what Ophila will teach us. Inheritance, ancestry. When you die and you have left nothing of note, can you say that you truly lived fully? I would prefer that when I die, that when I pass, that I will have achieved great things. And whether that is on this planet or in the spirit world, most likely in the spirit world, because that is my path. I want my life to have meant something. I want to have left this world and I want to have made it a better place, not just for myself or for my kids, but for my other loved ones, my friends, my family, and so that I can say that I did my duty, I did what I had to do. I didn't shy away from things in the moment of truth. I was not a coward. When I can stand before my ancestors and I can stand before my gods and I can salute them and I can tell them, I wasn't a pussy. That's what I want out of life. And if conflict scares you that much, meditate on this rune. Meditate on the entire Futhark. You will see that there are conflicts left and right. The inertia of Isa, stagnation, unmoving, unchanging, cold, empty, misty. That is what awaits you if you keep avoiding conflicts, if you keep avoiding change, if you keep avoiding all these things in life because you are too scared. Is that the kind of person that you want to be? I don't.